Hello, Seiiti Arata. Before we start, pause the video and write in the comment section down below what do you prefer to use to study, an ebook or a paper book? Alright, get ready, reading ebooks is better for your learning than paper books. Now, I know this statement may shock those of you who love paper books, who love physical objects, something to grab and scribble on. Now, I myself love paper books. I know how important they are in different types of reading, but that being said, last year the amount of digital books that I bought is incomparably bigger than the amount of paper books. And in today's conversation, I wanted to show you why ebooks are more efficient for those of you who want to speed up your learning. This chat here is targeted specifically for those of you who are at school, in college, or who want to take a very difficult exam or any certification test. So I ask you now to have an open mind, to hear the arguments first, and then at the end decide whether reading ebooks is better for you, for your learning, than reading paper books. Science has proven that the way you use books to learn is very inefficient. The first thing we have to understand is the role that books have in the learning process. Reading is usually one of the main points of contact between you and the subject matter. And what most students do is read one or several books about a specific topic, and this is typically a focused reading. Students usually highlight important sections to read them again later. And well, the problem is that this is a very inefficient way of studying. A research published in 2013 analyzed 10 study techniques, and then they concluded that highlighting a book is the most inefficient way of studying something. Now, do you know what's the second most inefficient technique? Reading a book or reading your notes over and over again, hoping that pure repetition will store the knowledge in your memory. This is intuitive, but it's not useful. Now, what does work then? Active retrieval of information and spaced repetition. These are the two most efficient study techniques, and both of them will work really well with ebooks. Ebooks help with the two most efficient study techniques, active retrieval and spaced repetition. The best way to learn something is to actively involve your brain in the learning process. And passively reading a book will not help you much because your brain is not involved in an active way. In simple reading, your brain is usually just trying to store information, and the main problem is that you have very little control over what your brain will decide to store or not in your memory. If you really want to store the things that you're reading into your memory, you need to actively involve your brain when you study, and the best way to do that is using the active retrieval technique. Active retrieval just means that you try to retrieve from your memory the information that you have just read without consulting the book. And when you do this, you're forcing your brain to work and to be actively involved in the study. For example, let's say that you just read a chapter in a biology book about the digestive tract. And when you're done reading, you have to close the book and ask yourself questions like, what are the organs that are part of the digestive tract? Which are the divisions in the digestive system? What are the accessory glands? When you ask yourself open questions like these, you're trying to retrieve from your memory the information that you had just read. And this is one of the best ways to learn. The advantage that ebooks have in the active retrieval process is the speed in which you can check whether your answers are right or wrong. And once you have answered these questions without consulting or checking your materials, you need to confirm, of course, if your answers were right or wrong. At this point, you just need to use the search engine from your ebook reader and find the right answer in a few seconds. If you want to highlight some part of the ebook as if it were a paper book, you can search specifically for the highlighted sections. This way, you can also check if there was something else that you didn't highlight. When you do this active retrieval the right way, you make sure that, at least at that moment, you have learned whatever you were studying. Now, the problem is that you will forget it pretty soon, and to solve that, we will use the second most efficient method to study, the spaced repetition system. Ebooks simplify the creation of a spaced repetition system. After you study something, it is natural tendency to forget the things that you have studied as time goes by. This has already been studied by science. It even has a name. It is the forgetting curve. Science has also studied how you can reduce that forgetting curve. And one of the best ways to not forget what you have learned is using spaced repetition. Spaced repetition is a study technique in which you revise the content that you have already studied from time to time. The goal is not to forget the things that you have learned. These repetitions are not fixed. You don't have to study the same topic every single week. There is a certain time frame to reduce the forgetting curve as effectively as possible. At the beginning, you will need to revise it more often, but as time goes by, you will space your revisions more and more. There are even programs, computer programs, that will estimate those intervals based on the answers that you do on those practice tests. Depending on whether you got the answers right, the program will repeat the questions from the flashcards more or less in each revision. The most known program is Anki, which I have recommended before, although many people have issues with it because of its complicated, not very intuitive interface for beginners. If you're just starting out, I have an easy-to-use flashcard tool with questions and answers that you can check at arata.se/flashcards. Ebooks gain an advantage on paper books with the spaced repetition technique, and you can select segments from your ebook and quickly paste them in your flashcards. For example, I have a Kindle, so I highlight specific sections, then I sync them with the Amazon cloud and I turn them on my computer, and I just have to go to the Kindle's webpage to access those sections. Another option is to open directly the ebook on the same device that I will use to create the flashcards. In this case, I would recommend using Calibre. Therefore, in a very productive way, you create your flashcards as you are reading your ebook. Many ebooks offer the option of highlighting the sections that have also been marked by a high amount of other fellow readers, and this can be an advantage to help you to find the most important points. Another option is to send the sections that you have selected on your ebook to some reading aid app, for example, Readwise. Those apps put all your notes into one place, but they can also send it to your email at a random interval, whatever you have been highlighting. And in this way, you can revise a little bit every day, reducing your forgetting curve. And besides that, ebooks can easily register the time and date in which you have read a book for the last time. This helps you to know it is time to revise the content. Remember that the revision should not consist in reading the book, but actually practicing the retrieval of information. Ebooks also make it easy for you to combine your studies from different topics, which is another pillar of spaced repetition. For example, if you have 10 different subjects, it's not very practical to carry 10 physical books from place to place. But in digital format, you can fit all your library in one single device that weighs less than just one single physical book. Ebooks also have their disadvantages. You can alternate with physical books to get the best of both worlds. Of course, there are some downsides of using ebooks. For example, research has shown that in some cases, reading from a computer is up to 25% slower than reading on paper. That is why the best thing to do is to use the ebook reader without that common LCD bright screen. So, when you read it, it is as close as paper as possible. Paper books also encourage handwritten notes, and some research papers have shown that taking notes by hand is better than, for your memory at least, than typing on a keyboard. So you can keep your book in a digital format, but you can take physical notes on paper. Even if you type them, try to formulate your notes as if they were questions, so they help you in the active retrieval process when you revise them. Lastly, remember that both things are not mutually exclusive. You can use both ebooks and paper books, depending on each case. Whenever you feel like you need paper materials, you can use a physical book. When you think that the advantages of using an ebook are greater, then you use a digital book. In this way, you enjoy the best of both worlds. Now, despite the prejudice that still exists against digital books, ebooks can be an excellent tool to help you learn faster. You have just found out that ebooks favor the most efficient techniques to study, which are active retrieval and spaced repetition. If you want to learn how to use these and other study techniques, whether in physical books or digital books, I invite you to check our Intelligence Arata Academy course. You just have to go to arata.se/intelligence to begin right now.